Welcome to the podcast for real life heroines. I'm your host, Susanna Liller. In each episode, I talk with women who dare to be themselves, real heroines who take risks, both big and small. They try new things, challenge themselves, and take leaps into the unknown. Together, we'll hear stories of women stepping into courage, finding and using their voice, and realizing the gifts they were born to give. Let's begin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me again in this podcast for real life heroines, where I get to talk to exceptional women who have been on the heroine's journey and who are willing, like Shannon Thompson, to share how that has been for them and what they've been through, and in the hopes that you will have a chance to hear their stories, and that'll make your journey easier or shed some light on it. So, Shannon, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
So glad to have you on the show. So, I want to say a few words about you, and I'm going to interrupt your bio because I'm going to be asking questions about it. And I think we should have full disclosure that I am particularly interested, wanting to engage in what you do because it's what I used to do, and that's
Yes.
conflict resolution. So you and I have talked about it and said, okay, Susanna, don't go deep dive into the conflict. We're going to talk mostly about your transition and how you got here. And some people are going to be saying, what the heck? Why would she want to work with conflict? And so we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But first, let me say a few words about you. So you are a conflict resolution educator and a content creator. So if any of you, and we'll share all your social media channels, but your YouTube channel is full of the content you're creating for conflict resolution, which is great, by the way.
Thank you.
And you want to make practical communication tools accessible to everyday people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So drawing from your work as a professional mediator and IEP mediated meeting facilitator. So what
Yeah.
is that?
Well, in schools, there are things called IEPs, and that's part of the special education world in public schools. And it just stands for Individualized Education Program. And it's for students who are in special education to help them get the services and supports that they need. And there are meetings, big meetings that happen for those with teachers, parents, other service providers, administrators, they're all there. And sometimes, particularly right now, because the world of education is kind of under a lot of stress, there can be a lot of conflict. And they need sometimes a neutral party to come in and kind of help have a productive conversation about what steps to take next.
So does that mean, in essence, you're running the meeting with all these different parties,
Yes,
and
exactly.
they all have their own particular agendas, and the student isn't there. It's people who care about the student.
Typically, once the student gets to be in high school, a lot of times they do start to come to the meeting because you start talking about transition out of high school, and they certainly need input into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and well, let me just check in. So
Mhm.
I also think, know that you were the head of a mediation.
Yes. A
Yes.
nonprofit organization. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, it did close down a couple of years ago because funding is challenging for right now for nonprofits who aren't like funding very basic needs like food, shelter, things like that. But it was a really successful program for several years, and it essentially provided mediation services to at low cost because it can be hard to access those services sometimes. And that was a really great experience. And I got to learn a lot about mediation and just working with people in general and people from all different backgrounds and demographics and things like that.
Because my understanding is anybody could go. If you were a father who was having troubles with getting along with your son, you could bring your,
Absolutely.
yeah, your conflict to there and have help from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's keep reading. Um, so what you're doing is you support these high stakes, emotionally charged conversations.
Yeah.
You also translate, and I think this is so much about the videos you're doing, translates complex conflict dynamics into
Yeah.
short, grounded lessons people can apply immediately in their own relationships.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at those, like what are a couple of them that you do, but I also want to share that you're a former educator.
Yes.
So you taught middle school?
I taught actually K through 8. So my first 3 years or so, I taught the kindergarten through around fifth grade. And then my last 3 years, I taught sixth through eighth grade.
In different subjects or primary, well, the elementary would be all different subjects. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was a special education teacher. So that meant that I kind of taught whatever subjects, particularly in elementary school, whatever subjects the students needed.
Right.
So it could be reading, writing, math, social regulation, kind of all
All
across
kinds of
the
it.
board. Yeah, exactly. And then once I got to middle school, that was a little different. I was kind of specialized in English language arts, and then there was another special education teacher at my grade level that specialized in math. But then we also, for like, home, what's that? Study halls, things like that, I would support students in their other subjects as well.
So I'm sure there was never any conflict that you ran into.
Never. No, there was a lot of conflict. Yeah, it was everywhere. It was certainly between parents and the schools. It was between teachers and administrators, teachers and teachers. And once I was a teacher still, once COVID hit, everything got amplified because of that. So that was kind of when I started to really think about making a transition because I was just noticing there's just all this conflict everywhere. And people who know me know that I struggle to stay quiet when I see something that I feel like needs change. And I was just seeing that everywhere, and I was being loud about it. And that wasn't always well received. And some of that was me like not learning conflict skills yet, too. Like some of that was my own doing. Um, but I tried to, my best to make change in that environment, and I just wasn't successful, and I was getting very, very frustrated. And I decided I was ready for a change. I was ready to do something different to have a different impact. I was just feeling this, as we talk about a lot with the work you do, a call.
So I'm going to stop you there because this is perfect because
Yeah.
that's what we talk about in this podcast is what the journey looked like. So picture Shannon, everyone just sort of trying to hold it back and then not being received well. And so that was her call. It was your call to, okay, this suit isn't fitting right
Yeah.
anymore, and I have to do something. So tell us though, that moment where you're thinking, I got to get out of here. And then how were you receiving that? Were you afraid to do it? How was that moment of the actual leaping?
I was terrified. That's why I think I started working with you around that time because I was like, this is a big, big change. Like I thought this was going to be my career, right? I went to grad school for it. I thought that this was going to be like what I did. I feel like I grew up, a lot of like my parents' generation, they would be in a job for like 20 years. It was this long haul. And I thought that that's what this was going to be. And it wasn't that. And And I actually, if I'm being honest, I think I felt the call a few years earlier when I left my first teaching position and came up to Maine. And at that time, I was too afraid to really leave teaching. I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to change where I teach, and maybe that will kind of, fix it. And it just wasn't enough. Like I knew that I needed something more, something different for myself.
Yeah. And that's such a lesson too, that it isn't necessarily we find the thing and we stick with it and that's the way. I mean, I think that's absolutely not the norm ever anymore. Rarely. So there you are then, you leave and
Yeah.
you're out there in the we call it the road of adventure, though it might not feel like it. And
Yeah.
what was that like? What did you do? You left your security, your comfort zone where you had been for how many years in education?
I had been in education for t around 10 years at that time. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I was talking with you at the time and talking about conflict and things like that, and you had talked about your past career as a mediator. And that was something I was really interested in. And one of the things that you actually said really stood out to me, which was that you weren't necessarily comfortable with conflict before being a mediator, and you wanted to learn more about it for that reason. And I was like, yeah, like that's what I want too. Like I don't really know how to manage conflict sometimes, and it does scare me. And I want to be able to learn more about it and be competent with it and help other people be competent with it. Because that was kind of what I was trying to do as a teacher too, and not always effectively, as we just discussed. So I just actually, before I even left teaching, I knew I was going to leave teaching at that point, but in the last few months of being a teacher, I started learning about mediation. So I started taking some courses through the Harvard Negotiation Project, and then there's a course right through USM here in Maine that there's no such thing as a mediation certification, but it does give you training to, very comprehensive training to become a mediator. And my goals were to become a court mediator and ultimately down the road to become a special education mediator through the Maine Department of Education. And I did. So I achieved both those things. And then I was kind of like, well, what next?
Well, and so congratulations, because I know that that's a lot to learn and deal with. You do so much role playing and a lot
Yes.
of information. And I think what's interesting is I think at the very core of it is communication skills,
Yes.
learning to listen. And we think we can listen, and we don't really, we
No.
listen passively, not actively. And so
Yep.
so much of your lessons on your channel, YouTube, is about communication. And I want to
Yeah.
just go, all right, so let's just go to do one of those now. And then when
Sure.
we come back, I want to hear about, well, how did you get to kind of say conflict is it, and that's what you want your business to be? I mean, people, when they're out there on the road of transition or adventure, it's so hard to know. They try this, try that. So, anyways, let's go to here's one. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, Checking your assumptions, your
Yes.
interpretation. And
Yes.
actually, you use this with road rage. So,
Yeah.
what do you teach about that, Shannon?
So, a lot of times, so what I've noticed in mediation is we'll all be not necessarily all at the table together, but at the mediation, and sometimes they're in separate rooms, but it's amazing to me how much people are just convinced that whoever they're in conflict with is like out to get them. Like they are just trying, like they're there in bad faith, they're trying to hurt them. And as a mediator, I have this vantage point where I get to see kind of everybody's thinking, and oftentimes in a lot of detail and very privately, because they are in separate rooms a lot of times. So they really, don't hold back. And And my impression most of the time is that they're not trying to, deliberately hurt each other. They're scared, they're trying to get their needs met. And a lot of times those things butt heads and are conflicting, but it's not like this, you know, really like just ill-intentioned uh mindset. It's just people who are having a hard time and are kind of bumping up against each other.
Yeah.
But it becomes a lot harder to resolve conflict when you do have that mindset that they're out to get you, because anything that they suggest or bring up, you're going to think is, has ulterior motives behind it. And I just see that over and over again. And it's one of the more frustrating things because if I could just help them see that they're not, really out to get each other, then I think that they can make a lot more headway. And I'm not immune to that at all. I certainly experience the same exact thing. And in my, relationships with people, and I have to constantly remind myself that, this isn't them just trying to get me. And I'm not always successful. So one example of that is road rage. So I struggle with road rage. Like whenever somebody cuts me off or does something that I think is kind of irresponsible, I feel really offended by it. And it takes away from my own happiness too, like going into that sort of spiral of thinking. So I wanted to use that as an example because I think a lot of people can relate to it.
I
Uh,
can, like when they're
yeah.
getting on your bumper and it's like, oh my gosh, she's going to come right through the car. Yes.
Yes, exactly. But I think we've all also been on the other side of it, where we've been the one to inadvertently cut someone off or do something that, we probably shouldn't have on the road. And I know for me, most of the time, it's not like I'm just trying to like piss off that, or sorry, make that person angry. I just, I messed up. And when you know that somebody like just messed up and they're not really targeting you, it's a lot easier to kind of move on from it.
Yeah. The last mediation I did was a little over a year ago, and I just keep thinking, and I'm sure you've felt the same, that the way this our culture and our world is getting so
Yes.
divided, it just makes it so much harder. Have you found that since you started learning mediation, it's gotten tougher?
It has. It's gotten much tougher. Actually, for the first time last fall, I started incorporating ground rules into my mediation practice. There's different theories of how you do mediation, and I really like sort of the transformative type of mediation where you really you do have confidence that the parties can resolve it, and you kind of let them drive the process to a certain extent. But I did find that it was helpful to have reminders at the beginning of sort of what conduct should and should not happen.
Mhm.
And that has made a big difference, but everybody's very emotionally charged right now and they're scared. And, things are changing very quickly around us and no one knows exactly what that means for them. And it makes it hard to kind of know what to do going forward.
Right. Which again is why your short, simple lessons are so helpful, I think. And
Thank you.
well, so let's go back to your transition.
Sure.
There you were looking for what am I going to do? And so how did it happen that you kind of settled into this feels right and then really bringing it to fruition with the videos and getting, how did that happen?
Well, it's been a very indirect journey. So I started, like I said, I got on the court roster, I got on the DOE's roster, and I was doing the IEP meetings, and that was all going great, and I was happy with that for a while. But I did start to kind of get restless again and wanting to kind of see what was going to happen with the next step. And also, when you do that work all the time, it can burn you out a little bit. So, yeah. So, I started like last fall in particular. I became for temporarily the only IEP facilitator in the whole state. And it was just a lot yeah. And I that did kind of burn me out a bit. So I kind of started looking for, what how do I want to sort of balance my life with this work? And I really missed teaching. And I didn't miss being in the schools because that wasn't the right environment for me, but I missed being able to share knowledge and to, process with students or clients, what they're learning. I just really enjoyed that. So um, I decided I would, at first, I was going to open my own practice, so mediation and conflict coaching. But I found that when whenever I thought about doing it, and I took steps, like I got, I created an LLC, all the things, got insurance, but the thought of actually like going through the process and not the mediation part or the conflict coaching part, but all the rest of it, like the behind the scenes stuff, the contracts, the scheduling, the billing, all of that, I just, I didn't want to do it.
Huh.
Like I really didn't want to do it.
Hmm.
And it took away all the joy for me from sort of the work itself. So and it wasn't really getting into the teaching part, which I really missed. So I decided I was going to kind of and it was also hard to get business too. So I should say that as well. The world of mediation isn't exactly well known or understood. And um, I found, particularly when I was running the nonprofit, it was really hard to get both parties to agree to come to mediation unless they were being ordered to do it by the court. So that's another piece to it. I wasn't exactly sure how I was going to kind of keep it running. So I decided I was going to kind of take a step back from that and kind of get back into my teaching roots and start some content creation. And I'm going to expand on it. So it's not going to just be videos. And I am going to create some longer ones too for people who want kind of more of like a course experience. And I also want to make written materials for people. So worksheets, things like that, practice scripts to help people kind of learn different ways of communicating and talking. And I really kind of view what I do more as communication than conflict. So I feel like communication is this big umbrella and conflict falls under that. And it's a big, big part of what I do. But then there's also like neuroscience and emotional regulation and just relationship dynamics that aren't necessarily part of conflict, and then our own sort of inner background and traumas and things like that. That's all part of communication. And it's a lot, I have experience with a lot of those things. So I want to, my focus is conflict, but I want to kind of help other people understand how those other things fit into it and fit into communication in general. And sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but
No, no,
uh,
this is so good. So good.
I, I didn't see online necessarily a lot of resources for the everyday person to just access these tools that like mediators and professionals have. And I didn't see a lot of resources like that that were provided by professionals. So like, there's people out there that, give their own opinions on things, and that's valuable. I'm not saying that that doesn't matter, but sometimes too, you really need to kind of hear from a professional what, you know, the the guidance is, I guess.
And there's books out there,
Mhm.
but unless you're prone to be interested in how does conflict happen, you're not going to go out there and read a bunch of books that are written
Yeah.
by some academic who knows a lot, but it's probably pretty dense,
Yes.
content. So, yeah, an easily accessible, digestible avenue to help you when you go off the tracks with some conflict. And there's so many, you hear about so many people that they're in conflict with their neighbor,
Yes.
and in our own families, there can be because of politics, big
Hmm.
conflicts. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
let's just look, and I'm keeping an eye on the time because We have to, right? And I just want to say, I'm such a fan of ground rules.
Yes.
Because I think it's helpful to have a structure that
Yeah.
people, I think people feel a little bit safer knowing there's something, there's boundaries in our discussion. But
Yes.
okay, again, not going there. So you wanted to, well, no, before there,
Okay.
about being empathetic. You say struggling to be empathetic. Are you doing that? Then maybe it's defensiveness. So what do you want to say about empathy?
So empathy, I wanted to start talking about empathy because I was noticing it a lot in, again, the mediations I do and in my own life, and how there's there's people who kind of are sometimes on two opposite spectrums, or people who it's like one individual who sometimes is on this end of the spectrum for empathy or can be on this end depending on the circumstances or the day. But a lot of times, like, so that one about defensiveness, so that was kind of geared towards somebody who may be struggling to show empathy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we don't like know why we're having these reactions. Like, why am I like, why can't I kind of understand their perspective? And it is a lot of times due to defensiveness or other factors, but defensiveness is a big one. And people, like, I feel like defensiveness has this really bad connotation to it, like, oh, you're being defensive and things like that. And I wanted people to understand that defensiveness is really about a vulnerability.
Mm.
It's about feeling like maybe you shouldn't be acting that way. Maybe you shouldn't be having those thoughts. Maybe you shouldn't be feeling that way. And because you feel like that's not allowed, you tend to push back. And when you're in that state, I mean, of course, you're going to struggle to show empathy because you're not feeling safe. You have to feel safe first before you can feel empathy for someone else. So I just wanted people to understand that, first of all, that's very normal,
Mhm.
and that, it's not because you're a bad person. It's because you're feeling vulnerable in that moment.
Right.
Oh,
And
sorry. And then, sorry, the opposite. Sorry, I didn't mean to. The opposite side is that those who show empathy, who kind of feel empathy too much. And I think that's what my latest video was about. And I think it was the one that was along the lines of stop fighting conflict or something like that. I can't remember what I called it.
right.
Uh, what was
Self
it?
self-compassion lowers defensiveness, you say.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yes, self-compassion lowers defensiveness. So that's sort of being able to uh, understand why you might be feeling that way and not judging yourself for it.
Right.
So that's sort of, again, for those who are maybe struggling in a particular moment to show empathy. But then there's other folks who maybe naturally feel empathy a lot, like all the time. And their natural inclination sometimes is to just kind of smooth things over at their own expense. So maybe things aren't resolved, but because they can kind of feel how the other person's feeling, they just want to make it right. And unfortunately, that can lead to resentment later because you're not getting your needs met in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And like that, I mean, I think we can all relate to both scenarios. We all have moments when we struggle to feel empathy. We all have moments when we felt too much and then we, didn't really advocate for ourselves. So that was sort of helping people. That video was about helping people understand how to sort of increase their tolerance for that.
Mm.
So finding some um, non high stakes situations
Yeah.
to practice not smoothing things over.
And you think about it, when we went through all our training in communication and you practice it, you do all these role plays and that are purposefully designed to trigger you so you can work with this stuff. And people on the street, they're not practicing, yeah. So again, giving them a chance to do that is part of your educating somehow. That would be great. So I
Yes.
want you to talk to us about imposter syndrome.
Yes. So that is, I think, a really common thing that folks in transition feel that I certainly have felt in all my transitions in my life. I think it's particularly common for women to feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really, for those who don't know what it is, it just means that you kind of feel like you don't uh belong, like you're a fraud almost,
Who am
like
I? Who am I
yeah.
to be talking about this stuff? Yeah.
Exactly. And boy, do I feel that. I continue to feel it. Like it's a daily thing that I have to kind of work through, because it's really vulnerable of experience putting yourself out there like that. And sometimes I don't get nice comments. Sometimes I get, really challenging comments to hear. And, that's just part of doing this kind of work. And I think it's for me in particular, when we deal with something like conflict, that's this universal experience. I experience conflict. And sometimes, even though I'm a conflict professional, I still don't handle it well. And that is, as particularly after an experience like that, I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, no one should listen to me. Like, why should I, like I should just close up shop. Like this is yeah. So I think but then I have other moments where, I am feeling more confident or somebody, lets me know how helpful something was to them. And then I'm like, okay, this is worthwhile. Like I can do this. I can, keep going. But it is hard. And I just wanted to talk about that a little because everybody, I think not everybody, but a lot of people struggle with it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you should stop. And it doesn't mean that you are wrong for doing what you're doing or that you actually are an imposter.
Right.
Um, and I felt that, I remember I felt that when I was in college for the first time. And I know a lot of my friends were talking about it too. And then, myself and a lot of my friends grew up to be these amazing women and they weren't imposters at all.
Right, right. And I think the answer is just to delve, just doing what you're doing.
Hmm.
Go into it, do your work. The ripple effect is going to be great. Um, don't compare. Women tend to really compare. Well, oh, look at her, she, and who am I? And no, no.
Yeah.
Follow where you're going. That's your path. And you will be, it'll be reinforced if it's right. And if it's not, it'll happen like what happened to you, Shannon, that you just weren't feeling good about all those court mediations and it never, when you said at the beginning, it's been a divergent path.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Hmm.
Because if it, I mean, we'd all be fine if it was just, oh, that's it, and we'd go right there. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Well, so I have been holding myself back, because we both have this same experience. We could talk about this, and maybe that's another
Yeah.
podcast one of these days. But my last question to you, unless there's anything else that I haven't asked you about that you want to be sure we bring up.
Um, I don't think so. No.
Actually, I'm looking at my notes for you and another video you talk about regulation first,
Hmm.
understanding second. And
Hmm.
I'm going to ask you, so I've been a student of Pilates a long time, and my teacher has said, stabilize, then mobilize. And I think this is kind of what you're talking about. Can you just say more about regulation first, understanding second?
Yes. So you when we're dysregulated, we're feeling very emotional, angry, scared, whatever it is, you're not in a place biologically a lot of times to understand where someone else is coming from because we do have our nervous system has this automatic reaction that happens when we feel a sense of threat, and it does not have to be a big threat for us to have that reaction. And this goes back to long time ago when before we lived in modern times and we were still running away from lions in the jungle and things like that. Our nervous system needed to do that. It needed to get, it's essentially it's a lot of adrenaline and
Get the
things like
hell out
that.
of there. Right. We have
Yes,
to
exactly,
run.
exactly. And what it does is it takes the blood out of your brain and
Yeah,
it puts it into your arms and legs so that you can run away.
right.
And then but you need, in order to understand and have higher level reasoning, you need blood in your brain, particularly in your prefrontal cortex. And it's just not there when you are feeling dysregulated and under threat, and you literally cannot understand and get to that place in that moment. It's not because you're a bad person, it's not because you lack skills. It's because in that moment, you're just you can't get there. So you need to take steps to regulate yourself. And a lot of times those are things like deep breathing, going for a walk in nature, for me, it's taking a break. Like I have to walk away for a while and just do something else, get my brain thinking in a different way. But that has to happen before you can try to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah. That is such an important thing to learn,
Yeah.
as we are equipped to get the hell out of there and
Yes.
run, but that
Yeah,
doesn't help, reason through a conflict. Yeah.
exactly.
So good. Now, all this stuff we've talked about, and it's so important. And as we've said, we could do more on this, but leaving people today with one thing, if they only remember one thing from you, Shannon, what do you want them to remember?
Gosh, whatever journey you're on, just don't stop. All
Mm,
you have to do is keep going. Even when it's hard, just keep going. And it will eventually grow into something. It may not be what you thought, but it's going to keep you, if as long as you keep going, it will keep going.
mm.
And you're going to find your groove.
Oh, that's so good. Yes. One foot in front of the other. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, those of you listening, if you want to find out more about Shannon, you can go to her YouTube channel, Shannon Conflict Resolution. She's also on LinkedIn, S. Thompson Conflict Resolution, and TikTok,
Yes.
Shannon Explains Conflict. So, Shannon, I can't thank you enough for coming and
Of course.
talking about what you're doing, which is such important work. Thank you for keeping going.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate being here, being able to share what I do, and always talking with you, Susanna, is always such a pleasure.
Right. Ditto. Everyone listening, thank you. Thank you for joining me again. I hope you will come next month and listen to our next interview. In the meantime, just keep going.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast for real life heroines. Your time and presence mean the world to us. If you're hungry for more inspiration and ready to craft your own heroine story, connect with Susanna outside of the show. Visit susannalillard.com to discover her courses and programs designed to empower you on your journey. Until next time, may your days be filled with the courage and strength of a true heroine. Stay inspired.